In the heart of Chicago, a powerful crime lord ruled with an iron fist and a cold heart. Vincent Moretti had everything: money, power, respect. But his 3-year-old daughter had never spoken a word, until the day a struggling maid from the South Side walked into their mansion, and the little girl's silence shattered with a single, devastating word that would change 3 lives forever. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what part of the world you're listening from. The Moretti estate sprawled across 2 acres in Lincoln Park, a fortress of limestone and wrought iron that stood apart from the elegant brownstones lining the tree-shaded streets. Inside, the October morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting geometric shadows across marble floors, so polished they reflected the crystal chandeliers above, like frozen lakes. Vincent Moretti stood in his study on the 2nd floor, phone pressed to his ear, watching the city wake below. At 38, he wore his authority like the tailored Tom Ford suit that hugged his broad shoulders, perfectly, without question. His dark hair was swept back from a face that could have been carved from the same stone as his mansion. Sharp jaw, calculating gray eyes, a mouth that rarely curved into anything resembling warmth. "I don't care what Castellano thinks," he said into the phone, his voice carrying the flat, measured tone of someone accustomed to obedience. "The shipment goes through Navy Pier on Friday. Tell him if he has concerns, he can discuss them with me personally." He ended the call without waiting for a response, and set the phone on his mahogany desk beside a framed photograph. In it, a woman with honey-colored hair smiled at the camera, holding a newborn wrapped in pink. Vincent's gaze lingered on the photo for 3 seconds. He'd timed it once, ensuring he never gave more, before turning away. The door opened without a knock. Marcus Chen, his head of security, and closest thing to a friend, entered with a tablet. "The new hire arrives in 20 minutes. Background check came back clean. Natalie Brooks, 24, South Side. No criminal record, no family ties to any organizations." "And the others?" Vincent asked, already knowing the answer. "5th one this month quit yesterday. Said the job wasn't worth it." Marcus's expression remained neutral, but Vincent caught the implication. The job, taking care of Isabella, his daughter. Vincent moved to the window, hands sliding into his pockets. Below, the estate's grounds stretched out in manicured perfection, hedges trimmed to geometric precision, a fountain in the center courtyard where water cascaded over marble angels. Everything ordered, everything controlled, except her. "She still hasn't spoken?" Marcus asked quietly. "No. 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days. Vincent knew the exact count. The pediatrician said there was nothing physically wrong. The child psychologist suggested trauma, attachment issues, selective mutism. They used words like environment and emotional availability while carefully avoiding direct accusations. Vincent paid them for their discretion and ignored their recommendations. Isabella had her mother's green eyes and dark curls. She had her own room filled with toys she never touched, a closet full of dresses she never chose, and a father who could orchestrate $1,000,000 deals with a phone call but couldn't coax a single word from her lips. The sound of small feet padding across marble drew his attention. Vincent turned to see Isabella standing in the doorway, clutching a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. She wore a white nightgown, her curls tangled from sleep, her wide eyes fixed on him with that same unreadable expression she always wore. "Good morning," he said, the words feeling formal even to his own ears. Isabella didn't respond. She never did. She simply stood there, rabbit dangling from one hand, watching him the way someone might watch a stranger. Mrs. Chen, Marcus's wife, and the estate's head housekeeper, appeared behind Isabella. "I'm sorry, Mr. Moretti. She got away from me." "It's fine." Vincent crouched down, bringing himself to Isabella's eye level. This close, he could see the faint freckles across her nose, the way her bottom lip trembled slightly. "Are you hungry?" Nothing, not even a nod. He reached out slowly, carefully, and smoothed a curl back from her forehead. Isabella flinched, just barely, just enough, and Vincent's hand froze in midair. Something twisted in his chest, sharp and unwelcome. "Take her to breakfast," he said, standing abruptly. "Make sure she eats." Mrs. Chen ushered Isabella away, and Vincent returned to his desk, to his phone, to the world he understood, the world of numbers and leverage and consequences. Not this minefield of flinches and silence. Marcus remained by the door. "Maybe this one will be different," They're never different, Vincent replied, pulling up his schedule. Meetings with the accountant, a call with the Port Authority contact, dinner with the alderman who needed reminding of their arrangement. She'll last 2 weeks, maybe 3, then find an excuse to leave. And if she doesn't, Vincent looked up, meeting Marcus's steady gaze, then she's either desperate or stupid. Either way, she won't change anything. But even as he said it, Vincent's eyes drifted back to the photograph on his desk, to the woman who'd filled this house with laughter and light, who'd made him believe he could be something other than what he was, who'd died bringing Isabella into the world, leaving him with a daughter who looked at him like he was the monster everyone else knew him to be. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Moretti, the new hire has arrived." Vincent straightened his tie, composed his expression into the mask of control he wore like armor. "Send her in." He didn't know it yet, but in 20 seconds, a woman with kind eyes and worn shoes would walk through his door and set in motion a chain of events that would crack the Marble Kingdom's foundation. The first tremor of an earthquake he couldn't control, couldn't buy, couldn't threaten into submission. Outside, the October wind picked up, rattling the windows. In the courtyard below, dead leaves skittered across perfect stone, disturbing the order. And somewhere in the vast, silent house, a little girl clutched her rabbit and waited for something she couldn't name. The door opened. Natalie Brooks had learned early that rich people's houses smelled different, not just clean. Anyone with bleach and determination could achieve clean, but expensive. Like furniture polish made from real lemons, fresh flowers replaced daily, and air that had been filtered of anything resembling real life. The Moretti estate smelled like all of that, and something else, something cold. She stood in the foyer, her second-hand coat suddenly feeling threadbare under the chandelier's unforgiving light. The woman who'd let her in, Mrs. Chen, she'd said, had disappeared down a hallway with instructions to wait. So Natalie waited, her resume clutched in hands that bore the calluses of her previous job at the diner, her eyes taking in the sweeping staircase, the artwork that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. She needed this job. The eviction notice gave her 30 days. Her mother's medication cost $300 a month. The community college classes she'd been saving for seemed further away every time she checked her bank account. Desperate, Marcus had said in her background check. He wasn't wrong. Footsteps echoed on the marble. Expensive shoes, measured pace. Natalie straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin the way her mother taught her. Broke wasn't the same as broken. The man who emerged from the hallway matched the house perfectly. Tall, dark-suited, with the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers or wanted posters. Natalie had grown up on the South Side. She knew the look of power, and she knew the look of danger. Vincent Moretti wore both like a second skin. Miss Brooks. His voice was smooth, controlled. He didn't offer his hand. "You understand the position?" "Yes, sir. Nanny for your daughter. Live in 6 days a week." The previous employees found the work challenging. Natalie met his gaze directly. She'd waitressed at O'Malley's for 3 years, dealing with drunks, grabbers, and men who thought a tip entitled them to more. She could handle challenging. "I'm not easily discouraged." Something flickered in his gray eyes. Amusement, maybe, or assessment. "Isabella requires patience. She doesn't speak. She doesn't engage. The doctors say there's nothing medically wrong, but she's..." He paused, and for just a moment, the mask slipped. "Difficult. She's 3, Natalie said quietly. 3-year-olds aren't difficult. They're just trying to figure out a world that doesn't make sense yet." Vincent's expression hardened, the momentary crack sealing over. "You have experience with selective mutism?" "No, sir. But I have experience with kids who've been hurt. Sometimes silence is the only control they have left." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither acknowledged. Vincent's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mrs. Chen will show you to your quarters. You start immediately. Isabella's routine is posted in the nursery. Follow it exactly. She eats at specific times, naps at 2, bedtime at 7:30. No deviations." "Mr. Moretti." "No deviations, Miss Brooks. Structure is what she needs." Natalie bit back her response. She needed this job. She could argue about parenting philosophies after she'd made rent. "Yes, sir." He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. My business is not your concern. You don't ask questions about visitors, phone calls, or my schedule. You take care of Isabella, nothing else. Are we clear?" Crystal clear. Natalie had suspected from the background check's intensity, from the security cameras she'd counted on her way in, from the way Marcus carried himself. Vincent Moretti wasn't just rich. He was connected, The kind of connected that made people on the south side lower their voices and look away. "Yes, sir." He left without another word, and Natalie released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Mrs. Chen reappeared, her expression kind but guarded. "This way, dear. I'll show you the nursery first. Isabella should be finishing breakfast." The nursery occupied a corner suite on the second floor, all soft grays and whites, with windows overlooking the courtyard. It looked like something from a catalog, perfectly coordinated, meticulously organized, and utterly devoid of personality. The toys on the shelves sat in neat rows, untouched. The books were arranged by size. Even the stuffed animals seemed positioned rather than played with, except for one. On a window seat, a little girl sat curled into herself, holding a rabbit that looked loved to the point of disintegration. One ear hung by threads. The fur was matted, but the child clutched it like a lifeline. "Isabella," Mrs. Chen said gently, "this is Miss Natalie. She's going to take care of you now." The girl didn't look up. She was tiny, delicate, with dark curls that caught the morning light, and skin that suggested she didn't spend much time in the sun. She wore a pristine white dress that seemed designed more for display than play. Natalie's heart clenched. She'd seen this before. Children who'd learned that being small and quiet and invisible was the safest way to exist. "Hello, Isabella," Natalie said softly, not approaching, not crowding. "That's a very special rabbit you have." "Does he have a name?" "Nothing." The child's fingers tightened on the worn fur, but she didn't acknowledge Natalie's presence. Mrs. Chen sighed. "She won't respond. She never does. The schedule is here." She indicated a laminated sheet on the wall. "Mr. Moretti is very particular about routine. Breakfast at 8, educational activities until 10, outdoor time if weather permits, lunch at noon, nap at 2, more activities, dinner at 6, bath at 7, bed by 7:30. Natalie scanned the schedule. It read like a prison timetable. "What about playtime?" "The activities are play. There are puzzles, building blocks, art supplies, all age-appropriate and educational." "I meant free play. Imagination, making messes." Mrs. Chen's expression grew uncomfortable. "Mr. Moretti prefers structure. After Mrs. Moretti passed, he felt that consistency and order would help Isabella feel secure, or help him feel in control." Natalie thought but didn't say. "How long ago did her mother die?" "Isabella was born 3 years ago this December. Mrs. Moretti died in childbirth." Mrs. Chen's voice softened. "She was a lovely woman. This house was different when she was alive." Natalie looked around the sterile nursery, then back at the silent child in the window. A little girl who'd never known her mother, whose father treated her like a problem to be managed, who'd learned before she could even speak that the world was a cold, controlled place where love was measured in schedules and structure. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. I can take it from here." The housekeeper hesitated. "If you need anything, I'll be fine." Alone with Isabella, Natalie moved slowly to the window seat, keeping her distance. She sat on the floor, back against the wall, where the child could see her but wouldn't feel trapped. "You know what I think?" Natalie said conversationally, as if they were old friends. "I think that rabbit has seen some adventures. Look at him. He's got the battle scars to prove it. I bet he's brave. I bet he's the kind of rabbit who isn't afraid of anything." Isabella's eyes flickered toward her, just for a second, before returning to the window. "Progress. I had a bear like that once," Natalie continued. "Mr. Buttons. Original name, right? He went everywhere with me. To the park, to school, even to the hospital when my dad got sick. He was there for all the important stuff." The child's grip on the rabbit loosened slightly. She was listening. "The thing about special toys," Natalie said quietly, "is they're not just toys. They're friends. And friends don't care if you talk or not. They just care that you're there." For the first time, Isabella turned her head fully toward Natalie. Those green eyes, her mother's eyes, Mrs. Chen had implied, studied her with an intensity that seemed far too old for 3 years. Natalie smiled, not the bright, forced smile adults usually gave children, but something genuine, something that said, "I see you." Isabella didn't smile back, but she didn't look away either. Outside, clouds gathered over Chicago, turning the morning gray. In his study below, Vincent Moretti conducted business with the same cold efficiency he always had, unaware that upstairs, in the sterile nursery he'd designed to keep chaos at bay, the first crack in his carefully constructed world had just appeared. It was small, barely visible, but cracks had a way of spreading. 3 weeks passed like a negotiation. Each day a careful exchange of trust given and boundaries tested. Natalie learned Isabella's language of silence, the way she held her rabbit closer when anxious, how she'd stand by the window when she wanted to go outside, the slight tilt of her head that meant she was curious about something. Vincent watched from a distance, appearing at irregular intervals like a storm cloud passing overhead. He'd stand in the nursery doorway during activities, his expression unreadable, then disappear back into his world of phone calls and meetings with men in expensive suits who spoke in careful euphemisms. Natalie pretended not to notice the way his jaw tightened when Isabella still didn't speak, or how his hands would flex at his sides when his daughter flinched at sudden movements. She focused on the child, not the father, though it was becoming harder to separate the two. The house revealed its secrets slowly. Natalie learned which rooms to avoid when Vincent had business associates over: the study, the library, the formal dining room where conversations stopped abruptly when she passed. She learned that Marcus wasn't just security, but Vincent's right hand, the one who made problems disappear. She learned that Mrs. Chen had worked for the Morettis since Vincent was a child, that her loyalty was absolute, and that she grieved for the woman whose photographs still lined the halls. And she learned that Isabella was terrified of her father. Not in the way of a child who'd been hit. Natalie had seen that before, recognized those specific fears. This was different. Isabella watched Vincent the way someone might watch a beautiful, dangerous animal behind glass, with fascination and fear in equal measure, never quite sure if the glass would hold. It broke Natalie's heart. She needs more than routine, Natalie said one evening, catching Vincent in the hallway outside the nursery. It was the end of her 3rd week, and she'd finally worked up the courage. She needs connection. Vincent's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. She has everything she needs. The best toys, the best education. She needs someone to play with her. Really play. Get messy. Make mistakes. Laugh. I don't laugh, Miss Brooks. I've noticed. The words came out sharper than intended. Natalie braced herself for dismissal, for the cold fury she'd seen Vincent level at others. Instead, he studied her with that same assessing look from their first meeting. You've lasted longer than the others, he said finally. Why? Because I'm not afraid of you. It was a lie. She was terrified of him, of what he represented, of the darkness that clung to him like cologne. But she was more afraid of what would happen to Isabella if she left. Vincent's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You should be. He walked away, leaving Natalie alone in the hallway with her racing heart and the distinct feeling she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. That night, Chicago's November wind howled against the windows. Natalie sat in her room, a comfortable space on the 3rd floor, far nicer than anywhere she'd lived, and tried to study for her online courses. But her mind kept drifting to the little girl sleeping down the hall, to the father who ruled an empire but couldn't reach his own daughter. A sound pulled her from her thoughts. Crying. Natalie was down the hall before she'd consciously decided to move. Isabella's room was dark, except for a nightlight shaped like a moon. The little girl sat up in bed, tears streaming down her face, clutching her rabbit, and making small, desperate sounds that weren't quite words. Hey, it's okay, Natalie murmured, sitting on the edge of the bed. Bad dream? Isabella launched herself into Natalie's arms with a force that nearly knocked her backward. Small hands fisted in her shirt, and the child buried her face against Natalie's shoulder, her whole body shaking with silent sobs. Natalie held her, rocking slowly, murmuring nonsense words of comfort. I've got you. You're safe. I'm right here. The door opened. Vincent stood silhouetted in the hallway light, still dressed despite the late hour. He must have heard the crying, too. For a long moment, he just stood there, watching his daughter cling to a woman she'd known for 3 weeks, while she'd never once reached for him. I can handle this, Natalie said quietly. Vincent's expression was unreadable in the shadows. I know. He left without another word, but Natalie caught something in his voice, something that sounded almost like grief. Isabella's crying gradually subsided into hiccups, then deep, shuddering breaths. Natalie kept holding her, kept rocking, until the child's grip loosened and her breathing evened out into sleep. Natalie tried to lay her back down, but Isabella's hands tightened immediately, a small sound of protest escaping her lips. Okay, Natalie whispered. Okay, I'll stay. She settled back against the headboard. Isabella curled in her lap and watched the moon nightlight cast shadows on the walls. Outside, the wind continued its assault on the windows. And somewhere in the vast house, a man who controlled an empire sat alone in the dark, unable to control the one thing that mattered. The next morning, Vincent was gone before breakfast. A meeting in Milwaukee, Mrs. Chen said. He wouldn't be back until late. Natalie took Isabella to the courtyard after lunch. The November air was cold but clear, the kind of crisp autumn day that demanded to be experienced. Isabella wore a purple coat and matching hat, looking like a tiny, perfect doll. "Want to see something cool?" Natalie asked. She led Isabella to a section of the courtyard where fallen leaves had gathered against the fountain's base, defying the groundskeeper's best efforts. Natalie scooped up a handful and tossed them in the air, letting them rain down around them. Isabella's eyes widened. "Your turn," Natalie encouraged. The child hesitated, glancing toward the house as if checking for permission. Then slowly, she reached down and grabbed a handful of leaves. She held them for a long moment, then threw them up with a sudden burst of energy. They scattered in the wind, and Isabella's mouth opened in a silent laugh. "Again," Natalie said, gathering more leaves. They played for 20 minutes, making piles and destroying them, throwing leaves at each other, crunching them underfoot. Isabella's perfect coat got dirty. Her hair came loose from its careful style. She looked, for the first time since Natalie had met her, like an actual 3-year-old. "Miss Brooks." Marcus's voice cut through their play. He stood at the courtyard entrance, his expression grave. "Mr. Moretti needs to speak with you. Now." Natalie's stomach dropped. The phone in Marcus's hand, the tension in his shoulders. Something was wrong. "Take Isabella inside," Marcus said. "Mrs. Chen will watch her." In Vincent's study, the afternoon light seemed harsh, unforgiving. Vincent stood by the window, his back to the door, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, dangerous. "I don't care what it takes. Find him. And when you do, make sure he understands what happens to people who steal from me." He ended the call and turned. His eyes found Natalie, and she saw something there she hadn't seen before. Not anger, but something colder, more calculating. "We have a problem," he said. "Someone in my organization has been skimming money, a lot of money, and they've decided to make it personal by threatening my family. Isabella is the target." Vincent's voice remained level, but his hands curled into fists. "I received a message an hour ago. They know her routine. They know about you. They're watching the house." Fear spiked through Natalie's chest. "What do we do?" "We?" Vincent's eyebrow rose. "You're an employee, Miss Brooks. You can leave. In fact, I'd recommend it. Things are about to get dangerous." Natalie thought of Isabella's silent laugh that morning, of the way she'd finally started to trust. "I'm not leaving her." "Noble, stupid, but noble." Vincent moved to his desk, pulled open a drawer and removed a handgun. He checked it with practiced efficiency, then set it down. "The house is secure. Marcus has doubled the guards. But until we find who's behind this, no one goes in or out without my approval. That includes you." "I understand. Do you?" Vincent stepped closer, and Natalie forced herself not to retreat. "Do you understand what I am, Miss Brooks? What I do? The kind of people who want to hurt me? I understand that Isabella is a 3-year-old child who didn't ask for any of this. And I understand that she needs someone who won't abandon her when things get hard." Something shifted in Vincent's expression. The mask cracked, just for a moment, and Natalie saw the man underneath, the one who stood in his daughter's doorway at night, watching her sleep. The one who kept his dead wife's photographs everywhere because removing them would mean accepting she was really gone. "She held you last night," he said quietly. "When she was crying, she reached for you." "Yes. She's never done that with me. Not once." The pain in his voice was raw, unguarded. Natalie's anger softened into something more complicated. "Maybe she's waiting for you to reach first," she said gently. Vincent's jaw tightened. The mask slammed back into place. "Get back to Isabella. Don't let her out of your sight. If anything happens, anything, you find Marcus or me immediately." Natalie nodded and turned to leave. "Miss Brooks." She looked back. "Thank you," Vincent said, "for staying." It was the first time she'd heard him say those words. They sounded foreign in his mouth, unpracticed, but genuine. Outside the study, Natalie leaned against the wall and tried to calm her racing heart. She'd known this job was complicated. She hadn't realized it might be deadly. But when she returned to the nursery and found Isabella waiting by the window, Rabbit clutched tight. Those green eyes finding hers with something like relief, Natalie knew she'd made the right choice. Whatever storm was coming, they'd face it together. The clouds outside grew darker, and in the city beyond the estate's walls, A man who'd stolen from Vincent Moretti made plans to take the one thing Vincent couldn't replace. The game had begun, and the stakes were higher than anyone realized. The house became a fortress. Guards appeared at every entrance. Cameras multiplied in hallways. And the easy rhythm Natalie had established with Isabella shattered under the weight of constant vigilance. The child felt it, the tension that crackled through the air like electricity before a storm. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, retreated back into herself until she was barely more than a ghost haunting the nursery. Vincent was everywhere and nowhere. Natalie would catch glimpses of him in tense conversations with Marcus, on phone calls that ended with barely controlled fury, disappearing for hours only to return with blood on his knuckles and ice in his eyes. 5 days after the threat, he found the man responsible. Natalie only knew because she heard the screaming. It came from somewhere below the house, a basement she hadn't known existed, muffled but unmistakable. She was in the nursery with Isabella, reading a story the child wasn't listening to, when the sounds filtered up through the floorboards. Isabella's eyes went wide. She dropped her rabbit and pressed her hands over her ears, her whole body going rigid. "It's okay," Natalie said quickly, pulling the child into her arms and moving away from the floor vent. "It's okay, sweetheart. Let's go to your room, okay? We'll put on some music." But Isabella was shaking, her breath coming in short gasps that signaled the edge of panic. Natalie had seen this before, the beginning of a full meltdown. She carried Isabella to her bedroom, closed the door, and turned on the sound machine to its highest setting. Ocean waves filled the room, drowning out the sounds from below. Isabella buried her face against Natalie's shoulder, her small body trembling. "I've got you," Natalie murmured, rocking her. "You're safe. I promise you're safe." But she wasn't sure if it was true. An hour later, when Isabella had finally cried herself into exhausted sleep, Natalie laid her in bed and went looking for Vincent. She found him in his study, washing blood from his hands in the attached bathroom. He didn't look up when she entered, just continued scrubbing with methodical precision. "Is he dead?" Natalie asked. "Not yet." Vincent's voice was flat, emotionless. "But he will be." Isabella heard. That made him pause. He looked up, meeting her eyes in the mirror. She was supposed to be in the nursery. The soundproofing isn't perfect. She heard enough. Natalie crossed her arms, anger overriding fear. "She's terrified, Vincent. She's 3 years old, and she just heard someone being tortured in her own house. This is my house." Vincent turned, drying his hands on a towel. "And that man tried to have my daughter kidnapped. Forgive me if I'm not concerned about her delicate sensibilities. She's a child. She's my child." The words exploded out of him with a force that made Natalie step back. "She's mine, and I will do whatever it takes to keep her safe. If that means getting my hands dirty, if that means becoming the monster everyone already thinks I am, then so be it. At least she'll be alive, and traumatized, and terrified of you." Vincent's expression went cold. "She's already terrified of me. At least this way. She has a reason." The resignation in his voice broke something in Natalie's chest. She saw it then, the wall he'd built between himself and Isabella, brick by brick, constructed from violence and grief, and the absolute certainty that he was incapable of being what his daughter needed. "That's not true," Natalie said quietly. "She's not afraid of you. She's afraid of losing you. She barely knows me. Because you won't let her." Natalie moved closer, her voice softening. "You think keeping your distance protects her. But all it does is teach her that love is something distant and cold, that the people who are supposed to care for her will always be just out of reach." Vincent's jaw worked. "Her mother isn't here. And I'm sorry for that, Vincent. I'm sorry you lost her. And I'm sorry Isabella never got to know her. But you're here. You're alive. And that little girl upstairs needs you to be more than just the man who keeps her safe. She needs you to be her father. I don't know how." The admission came out barely above a whisper. Vincent turned away, his shoulders rigid. "I don't know how to be what she needs. Everything I touch, I destroy. Everyone I love." His voice broke. "My wife died because of me. Because I got her pregnant. Because I brought her into this life. And Isabella is not your wife. She's your daughter. And she's not going to die because you love her. You don't know that." "No," Natalie admitted. "I don't. But I know that she's dying a little bit every day you keep her at arm's length. I see it in her eyes, Vincent. She's giving up." The words hung in the air between them. Outside, night had fallen over Chicago, turning the windows into black mirrors that reflected the study's warm light and the two people standing in it, A man built from violence and control, and a woman who'd somehow become the bridge between him and the daughter he couldn't reach. "What do I do?" Vincent asked finally. "Start small. Read her a bedtime story. Sit with her at breakfast. Let her see you smile." Natalie paused. "Let her see you be human." Vincent laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm not sure I remember how." "Then learn. For her." He looked at Natalie then, really looked at her, and she saw something shift in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or gratitude. "Why do you care so much? She's not your daughter." "No, but I care about her anyway." "That's what people do, Vincent. They care about each other, even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous, even when it doesn't make logical sense." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." Natalie smiled slightly. "But it's also the only thing that makes life worth living." Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved past her, toward the door. "I need to finish dealing with the situation downstairs. But tomorrow," he paused, "tomorrow I'll try. With Isabella. I'll try." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even a commitment. But it was more than Natalie had expected. "That's all anyone can do," she said. After he left, Natalie returned to Isabella's room. The child was still asleep, her face peaceful in a way it rarely was during waking hours. Natalie sat in the chair by the bed, watching her breathe, and tried not to think about the man being tortured in the basement, or the violence that permeated every corner of this beautiful, terrible house. She thought instead about the photograph on Vincent's desk, the woman with the honey-colored hair who'd loved a man everyone else feared, who'd seen something in him worth saving. Maybe Natalie was foolish to think she could do the same, to think that a man built from darkness could learn to live in the light. But as she watched Isabella sleep, clutching her worn rabbit like a talisman against the world's cruelty, Natalie knew she had to try. The next morning, Vincent appeared at breakfast. It was unprecedented. He usually ate in his study or not at all, conducting business through meals like they were just another transaction. But at 8 o'clock, he walked into the small dining room where Natalie and Isabella sat and pulled out a chair. Isabella's eyes went wide. She looked at Natalie, then back at her father, her small body going still. "Good morning," Vincent said. His voice was stiff, formal, but he was trying. "May I join you?" Natalie nodded encouragingly at Isabella, who didn't respond, but didn't flee either. Vincent sat. Mrs. Chen appeared with coffee and a plate of eggs, her expression carefully neutral, though Natalie caught the flash of surprise in her eyes. They ate in silence. Vincent cut his food with precise movements. Isabella pushed hers around her plate. Natalie tried to project calm normalcy while her heart hammered against her ribs. "I thought," Vincent said finally, setting down his fork, "that perhaps after breakfast we could go to the courtyard, the three of us, if you'd like." He directed the question at Isabella, who stared at him with those two old eyes. "There are leaves," Natalie added gently. "Remember how much fun we had with the leaves?" Isabella's gaze flickered to Natalie, then back to Vincent. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. Vincent's expression didn't change, but Natalie saw his hand tremble slightly as he picked up his coffee cup. "Good. That's good." It was awkward. It was painful. It was the most human Natalie had ever seen him. After breakfast, they bundled Isabella in her purple coat and went outside. The November morning was cold and bright, the sky a hard blue above the courtyard's stone walls. Vincent stood uncertainly in the center of the space, looking profoundly out of place in his expensive suit among the fallen leaves. Isabella clutched Natalie's hand, watching him. "Show him what we do," Natalie encouraged. Isabella didn't move. "It's okay," Natalie said. "He wants to play with you. He just doesn't know how. Maybe you can teach him." Isabella looked up at Natalie, then at her father. Something passed across her small face. Consideration, maybe, or the faint stirring of hope. She let go of Natalie's hand. Step by careful step, Isabella walked to where the leaves had gathered. She bent down, scooped up a handful, and looked at Vincent. He crouched down to her level, his movements slow and deliberate. "Like this?" He gathered his own handful of leaves. Isabella nodded. Together, father and daughter threw leaves into the air. They fell around them like confetti, like snow, like the pieces of walls crumbling. Isabella's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile but was close. Vincent's expression remained serious, but his eyes held something Natalie hadn't seen before. Wonder. They played for 10 minutes. It wasn't much. It wasn't a miracle. But it was a beginning. When they came back inside, Isabella's cheeks were pink from the cold, and Vincent's suit had leaf fragments clinging to the fabric. He didn't brush them off. "Thank you," he said to Isabella, "for teaching me." The child didn't respond, but she didn't flinch away when he smoothed a curl back from her forehead. Progress. That afternoon, while Isabella napped, Natalie found Vincent in his study. He was staring at the photograph on his desk, his expression unguarded. "She would have known what to do," he said without looking up. "My wife. She would have made this easy." "Maybe," Natalie said. "Or maybe she would have struggled too. Being a parent is hard for everyone, Vincent. You're not failing because you don't have all the answers. I'm failing because my daughter is silent and terrified. She's silent because she's protecting herself, and she's terrified because the world has taught her that people leave. But you're still here. That matters more than you know." Vincent finally looked at her. "You're very optimistic for someone who grew up on the South Side. You're very pessimistic for someone who has everything." He laughed. Actually laughed. It was brief, rusty from disuse, but genuine. Touché. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Natalie didn't want to name. She was his employee. He was her boss. He was dangerous, connected, everything she should stay away from. But he was also a father trying to reach his daughter, a man learning to be human again. "Tomorrow," Vincent said, "I'll read to her, before bed. If you think she'd want that, I think she'd love that." He nodded, turning back to the photograph. Natalie left him there, alone with his grief and his hope, and tried not to think about how much she'd started to care about both the broken man and his silent daughter. Outside, the Chicago wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming snow. In the basement, the man who'd threatened Isabella was dead, his body already being disposed of by people who specialized in making problems disappear. But upstairs, in a nursery filled with unused toys and careful routines, a little girl slept with her rabbit and dreamed of leaves falling like rain, and a father who'd finally looked at her and seen not his failure, but his daughter. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time, there was light breaking through the clouds. December arrived with snow that blanketed Chicago in white, softening the city's hard edges. Inside the Moretti estate, something else was softening too. The rigid walls Vincent had built, brick by careful brick, were beginning to crumble. He read to Isabella every night now, stumbling over children's books with the same intensity he brought to business negotiations, his deep voice turning fairy tales into something almost sacred. Isabella would sit beside him on her bed, rabbit in her lap, and listen. She still didn't speak, but she'd started to lean against his shoulder. Small victories that felt monumental. Natalie watched them from the doorway, her heart doing complicated things she tried not to examine too closely. She was falling for them, both of them, the silent child who was slowly learning to trust, and the dangerous man who was slowly learning to love. It was stupid. It was reckless. It was inevitable. "You're staring," Marcus said one evening, appearing beside her in the hallway. Natalie jumped. "I'm observing. There's a difference." "Uh-huh." Marcus's expression was knowing. "Be careful, Natalie. Vincent's world. It's not a place for people like you. People like me. People who still believe in happy endings." Natalie wanted to argue, but Marcus was already walking away, leaving her with the uncomfortable truth of his words. The next day was December 15th, 3 months since Natalie had started. Mrs. Chen made a special lunch to celebrate, and Vincent actually joined them, sitting at the small table in the breakfast nook instead of his study. 3 months, he said, looking at Natalie. "You've officially lasted longer than anyone else. Should I expect a trophy?" "I was thinking a raise." Natalie blinked. "Seriously? You've earned it. Isabella is—" He glanced at his daughter, who was carefully arranging her food into patterns on her plate. "She's different. Better. Because of you." "She's better because you're trying," Natalie said quietly. She needed her father. She just needed him to show up. Vincent's expression softened in that way it did now, when he looked at Isabella, like he was seeing her for the first time, over and over again. "I'm not very good at this. You're getting better." "Am I?" He watched Isabella push her peas into a circle. "She still won't talk to me. Won't talk to anyone. She will, when she's ready. What if she's never ready? What if I've broken something in her that can't be fixed?" Natalie reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. The gesture was automatic, instinctive. Vincent's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't pull away. "You haven't broken her," Natalie said. "She's just learning that it's safe to be whole again." That takes time. Vincent's fingers curled around hers, just for a moment, before he pulled back. Thank you for believing that. The moment was interrupted by Isabella dropping her fork. It clattered against her plate, and the child made a small sound of frustration. It's okay, Natalie said, retrieving the fork. Here, let's get you a clean one. But Isabella was staring at her plate, at the scattered peas, her small face scrunched up in concentration. She looked at Natalie, then at Vincent, then back at her plate. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Isabella. Vincent leaned forward, his voice careful. What is it, sweetheart? The child's eyes filled with tears, her hands clenched into fists. She was trying so hard to say something, the effort visible in every tense line of her small body. It's okay, Natalie said gently. You don't have to. Mommy? The word was barely a whisper, rough from disuse, but unmistakable. The world stopped. Isabella was looking at Natalie, tears streaming down her face, her bottom lip trembling. Mommy, she said again, louder this time. And then she was crying in earnest, reaching for Natalie with desperate hands. Natalie pulled her into her arms automatically, her own eyes burning. I've got you, sweetheart. Mommy, mommy, mommy. Isabella sobbed the word over and over, clinging to Natalie like she was the only solid thing in a tilting world. Natalie looked up at Vincent, expecting anger or hurt, or the cold mask slamming back into place. Instead, she saw tears. Vincent Moretti, the man who ruled Chicago's underworld with an iron fist, who'd built an empire on fear and violence, was crying. Silent tears that tracked down his face as he watched his daughter speak for the first time, calling another woman the name he'd probably dreamed of hearing. Vincent, Natalie started. He shook his head, standing abruptly. Excuse me. He left the room quickly, and Natalie heard his study door close with a decisive click. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, her hand over her mouth. She spoke. Oh my God, she spoke. Get Vincent, Natalie said. Please, he needs to be here for this. Mrs. Chen nodded and disappeared. Isabella was still crying, still clinging to Natalie, but the sobs were quieting now. Natalie rocked her gently, murmuring reassurances, her mind racing. Mommy. Isabella had called her mommy. It should have felt wrong. It should have felt like a betrayal of the woman in the photographs, the one who died bringing this child into the world. But all Natalie felt was a fierce, protective love that scared her with its intensity. It's okay, she whispered into Isabella's curls. You're so brave. You're so, so brave. Mommy, stay? Isabella's voice was small, uncertain. I'm not going anywhere. I promise. Vincent returned with Mrs. Chen, his face composed but his eyes still red. He approached slowly, carefully, like Isabella was a wild thing that might spook. Isabella, he said softly. The child looked up from Natalie's shoulder, her face blotchy from crying. I'm so proud of you, Vincent continued. You used your words. That was very brave. Isabella studied him for a long moment. Then, in a voice that was barely audible, Daddy? Vincent's composure shattered. He dropped to his knees beside them, his hand reaching out to cup Isabella's cheek. Yes, sweetheart. I'm your daddy. Daddy sad? No, His voice broke. I'm happy. So happy. Isabella reached out with one hand, still holding onto Natalie with the other, and touched Vincent's face. Her small fingers traced the tear tracks on his cheeks with wonder. Daddy crying, she observed. Sometimes people cry when they're happy, Natalie explained gently. Your daddy is very, very happy right now. Because I talked? Because you talked, Vincent confirmed. I've been waiting so long to hear your voice. Isabella considered this. Then, with the brutal honesty of a 3-year-old, I was scared. Of what, sweetheart? Of everything. Isabella's lip trembled again. But Mommy makes it not scary. She meant Natalie. The word was a knife and a gift all at once. Vincent's eyes met Natalie's over Isabella's head. In them she saw gratitude and grief and something else. Something that made her breath catch. Natalie is very special, Vincent said carefully. She takes very good care of you. She loves me, Isabella said with simple certainty. Yes, Natalie whispered. I do. Very much. And Daddy loves you, Vincent added. More than anything in the world. Isabella looked between them, her young mind processing. Like a family? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications none of them were ready to address. Yes, Vincent said finally. Like a family. Isabella smiled. A real, genuine smile that transformed her face. Good, She yawned then, the emotional exhaustion catching up with her. Natalie carried her to the nursery for her nap, Vincent following behind. As they tucked Isabella into bed, the child grabbed both their hands, holding them together. "Stay?" she asked sleepily. "We'll stay," Natalie promised. They sat on either side of the bed, hands linked across Isabella's small body, and watched her drift off to sleep. Her lips moved slightly, forming words in her dreams, words she'd finally found the courage to speak. "I'm sorry," Vincent said quietly, "that she called you that. It must be uncomfortable." "It's not," Natalie admitted. "It should be, but it's not. She loves you. I love her too." Vincent's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it made her ache. "I know. I see it every day. The way you look at her, the way you fight for her. You've given her something I couldn't." "Vincent, let me finish." He took a breath. "You've given her safety. Not the kind that comes from guards and guns, but the kind that comes from knowing someone will catch you when you fall. That's what she needed. That's what I couldn't give her. You're giving it to her now," Natalie said. "Every time you read to her, every time you play with her, every time you show up, you're teaching her that she matters, that she's loved. Because of you. You showed me how." They sat in silence, hands still linked, while Isabella slept between them. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering Chicago in fresh white. Inside, something had shifted irrevocably. A child had spoken, a father had cried, and a woman who'd come to this house looking for a paycheck had found something infinitely more valuable and dangerous. A family, even if it was built on foundations of violence and grief, even if it couldn't last, even if the world outside these walls would never understand. For now, in this moment, they were enough for each other, and sometimes, Natalie thought, watching Vincent's thumb trace patterns on her skin, sometimes that was everything. Christmas came to the Moretti estate like a revelation. For the first time in 3 years, Vincent allowed decorations. A tree in the foyer, lights along the banisters, garlands that made the cold marble feel almost warm. Isabella helped, chattering constantly now that she'd found her voice, narrating every ornament placement with the serious concentration of a child who'd been silent too long and was making up for lost time. "This one is a snowman, and he's very cold, so he needs to go near the warm lights. And this one is a reindeer, and reindeer like to be high up because they fly, so Daddy has to put it on the tall branch." Vincent, balanced on a ladder in a suit that cost more than most people's cars, carefully hung the reindeer where his daughter directed. "Here? Higher. Isabella, I'm going to run out of tree. Then make the tree taller." Natalie laughed from her position on the floor, untangling lights. "I don't think that's how trees work, sweetheart. Daddy can do anything," Isabella said with absolute certainty. "He's the boss." Vincent caught Natalie's eye, and something passed between them. Something warm and complicated and terrifying. They hadn't talked about what was happening between them. The way his hand would find hers when they walked Isabella to the courtyard. The way she'd catch him watching her with an expression that had nothing to do with employer and employee. The way they'd started having dinner together after Isabella went to bed, talking about everything and nothing until the early morning hours. They were falling, both of them. And neither knew how to stop it, or if they even wanted to. Marcus knew. He'd pulled Natalie aside the week before with a warning that was equal parts concern and resignation. "He's different with you," Marcus had said. "I've known Vincent since we were kids. I've never seen him like this. Not even with his wife. We're not. You are. You just haven't admitted it yet." Marcus's expression had been serious. "Be careful, Natalie. Vincent's world is dangerous. People who get close to him have a habit of getting hurt. He wouldn't hurt me. Not intentionally. But his enemies would, and they're always watching for weaknesses." The warning had lodged itself in Natalie's chest like a splinter, but when she looked at Vincent now, carefully hanging ornaments at his daughter's direction, she couldn't bring herself to care about the danger. Some things were worth the risk. Christmas Eve arrived with more snow and a rare night off for Vincent. No meetings, no calls, no men in dark suits discussing things in euphemisms. Just the 3 of them, and Mrs. Chen's incredible dinner, and a living room filled with wrapped presents that Isabella kept trying to peek at. "Not until tomorrow," Vincent said for the 10th time, gently steering his daughter away from the tree. "But what if Santa doesn't come because I was bad?" "You weren't bad. I didn't talk for a very long time. That's bad." Vincent crouched down to Isabella's level, his expression serious. "Listen to me. You were never bad. You were protecting yourself, and that was very smart. But you don't have to protect yourself anymore, okay? Because Daddy's here, and Natalie's here, and we're going to keep you safe. Promise? I promise. Isabella threw her arms around his neck, and Vincent held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Which, Natalie supposed, she was. That night, after Isabella was asleep, Natalie and Vincent sat in the living room with the lights off except for the tree. The colored bulbs cast rainbow shadows across the walls, turning the usually austere space into something magical. "Thank you," Vincent said quietly. "For what?" "For this. For her. For..." He gestured vaguely. "Everything. You don't have to thank me for caring about your daughter, Vincent. I'm not thanking you for that." He turned to face her, and the lights caught in his eyes, making them seem less gray and more silver. "I'm thanking you for caring about me." Natalie's breath caught. "Vincent, I know I'm not easy. I know my life is complicated and dangerous and probably not something you signed up for when you took this job, but you're still here, and I need you to know that I see that. I see you. I see you too," Natalie whispered. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing across her skin with devastating gentleness. "I'm falling in love with you," Vincent said. "I've been trying not to. I've been telling myself it's wrong, that I'm your employer, that I'm putting you in danger just by feeling this way. But I can't stop." "Then don't." Natalie closed the distance between them, and when their lips met, it felt like coming home. Like every broken piece of both their lives had been leading to this moment, in this room, with Christmas lights painting them in colors, and a sleeping child upstairs who'd brought them together. The kiss was soft, tentative, full of promise and fear in equal measure. When they pulled apart, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I don't know how to be in love without destroying it." "Then we'll figure it out together, one day at a time." "It won't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is." Vincent smiled, a real smile, the kind that transformed his face from dangerous to beautiful. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You were just too busy being brooding and mysterious to notice." He laughed, and Natalie thought she could spend the rest of her life trying to make him laugh like that, open and genuine and free. They stayed up talking until dawn, wrapped in each other and the soft glow of Christmas lights, making plans for a future that seemed impossible but felt inevitable. Christmas morning arrived with Isabella's excited shriek of "Santa came" echoing through the house. They spent the day in a chaos of wrapping paper and new toys, and Isabella's running commentary on everything. "Look, Daddy, a dollhouse, and the dolls have a mommy and a daddy and a little girl, just like us." Vincent met Natalie's eyes over Isabella's head, and she saw the question there. "Just like us?" She nodded. "Yes, just like us." That evening, after Isabella was in bed and the house was quiet, Vincent led Natalie back to the living room. A single present remained under the tree, small and wrapped in silver paper. "I got you something," he said, suddenly looking uncertain. "If it's too much, you can..." "Vincent," Natalie took the box with shaking hands. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." Inside was a key on a simple chain. Natalie looked up, confused. "It's to the house," Vincent explained. "I know you already have a key as an employee, but this is different. This is..." He took a breath. "This is me asking you to stay. Not as Isabella's nanny, but as part of our family. As someone I love. If you want that. If I'm not asking too much." Natalie's eyes filled with tears. "You're asking exactly enough." She kissed him then, there under the Christmas tree, in the house that had once felt like a fortress, but now felt like home. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you too," Vincent replied. "Both of you. My girls." Upstairs, Isabella slept peacefully, her rabbit tucked under her arm, dreaming of families and Christmas, and a future that felt bright and safe. The months that followed weren't perfect. Vincent's world was still dangerous, still complicated. There were nights when he came home with blood on his hands and darkness in his eyes. There were moments when Natalie questioned if she'd made the right choice, if loving him was worth the risk. But then Isabella would laugh, or Vincent would smile at her across the breakfast table, or they'd curl up together on the couch while Isabella narrated her latest adventure. And Natalie knew. This was worth it. They were worth it. By spring, the Moretti estate had transformed. The marble floors still gleamed, but now they were scattered with Isabella's toys. The formal rooms still stood pristine, but the living spaces were lived in, loved in. Photographs appeared on tables, not just of the woman who'd come before, but of the family they were becoming. Vincent proposed in May, in the courtyard where they'd first played in the leaves. Isabella helped, presenting Natalie with a ring and a carefully rehearsed speech about how Daddy loves you, and I love you, and please say yes, because I want you to be my real mommy. Natalie said yes through tears and laughter, and Isabella cheered, and Vincent kissed her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. They married in June, a small ceremony in the estate's garden. Isabella was the flower girl, taking her job with utmost seriousness. Marcus was Vincent's best man, and Mrs. Chen cried through the entire ceremony. When the officiant pronounced them married, Isabella shouted, "Finally," so loudly that everyone laughed. That night, after the guests had left and Isabella was asleep, Vincent and Natalie stood in the courtyard under the stars. "Are you happy?" Vincent asked, pulling her close. "Terrified and happy," Natalie admitted. "Is that normal? If it's not, we'll make it normal." They swayed together in the darkness, and Natalie thought about the girl she'd been 6 months ago. Desperate, broke, taking a job she didn't understand because she had no other choice. She'd come to this house looking for survival, and found something infinitely more valuable. A family, a home, a love that was complicated and dangerous, and absolutely worth fighting for. "Thank you," Vincent murmured into her hair. "For what?" "For seeing me, the real me, and loving me anyway. Thank you for letting me in. Always," Vincent promised, "for the rest of our lives." And in the house behind them, in a room filled with toys and laughter and love, a little girl who'd once been silent slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that she was safe, she was loved, and she had a family that would never let her go. The marble kingdom had become a home. The fortress had opened its gates, and the man who'd ruled with fear had learned to lead with love. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know which moment touched your heart the most, and don't forget to tell me where in the world you're listening from. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to share more stories with you soon.